Today we'll be hopping into the ThinkorSwim platform to place some pretty advanced trades using the MACD and the simple moving average as our triggers. I've been having some fun with these already, and I've already made a few others if you want to check those ones out as well. But what we're going to be doing today is using two different popular indicators to automatically place a trade to both buy and sell a specific stock. For this one, we're going to be using the simple moving average to get an idea on the overall trend of the stock, while also using the MACD crossover as our actual buy or sell trigger. Now that might sound a little bit confusing, so let's come over here and take a look at my chart for just a second. Right up here at the top, you can see I currently have the 50-period moving average, which is currently this blue line right here. And I've also got the 200-period moving average, which is going to be the gold line right below it. Now, the very first thing that my order is going to be looking for is for that 50-period moving average to currently be above the 200 moving average. So that would indicate to me, at least in a limited way, that the stock is currently in an uptrend. So then if it isn't an uptrend, if this 50-period moving average, like in this case right here, it's currently above the 200-period moving average, I would then want to use the MACD down here below to actually trigger my trade. So in this case, if the 50-period moving average is above the 200, I then want to look at the MACD indicator, and whenever the MACD line, which again is this blue line, crosses above the signal line, which is the gold line, then I want to submit my trade. And to make it a little bit more complex, I also want that crossover to happen while below the zero line. So right here, that purple line in the center. If we look back in time a little bit, we can see a couple of examples of when this would activate. So back here, we can see the MACD line crossing above the signal line. We can also see it way back here as well. So that would be another crossover to activate the buy ticket. And then after I buy it, I want to automatically sell that same position whenever the MACD line crosses back below the signal line. So that'll be my signal to sell the stock. But just remember, you can use any studies or any combinations of studies that you want, but this is going to be our example for today. If anything, this is just to give you an idea on what is possible to do within here. Please don't get too overwhelmed if it does seem confusing. That is completely normal. It's a lot to take in, but it is worth learning about. Now, in order to begin, we're going to start by building out our buy ticket by coming up here to the very top of our screen and finding the last traded price of the stock right here, 155 even. And by clicking on that, we can then see a little menu pop up down below where we can then find and click on the buy button. That will then automatically build out an order ticket to buy the stock down here towards the bottom of the screen. And if this was a standard order, we would then fill out the number of shares we intended to buy, the price we wanted to buy it at, the order type we wanted to use, and then how long we wanted the order good for. However, in my case, in order to add the study condition, we're going to need to start by coming over here to the far right-hand side of the order ticket and clicking on this little gear icon. That window that then pops up over here on the left-hand side is where we're going to be able to add our more advanced conditions. These conditions could be based on time, on price, or in our case, a study crossover. To begin, let's go ahead and come down here to the conditions section, and we're going to simply find the little word here that says symbol and click in the empty box right below it. That is going to automatically load the symbol of the stock that we're currently trading. So in this case, Apple, which makes sense, but you could technically base this trade off of another stock symbol if you wanted to. But once we've got that in there, so we've got Apple in this case, we can then come to the right to the next box over and click in here right below the method column. By default, it's going to base it off of the mark price of the stock, but what we want to do is base it off of a study. So we're going to come down here below where it says study, then come to the right and find the edit button so we can start fresh. That'll then open up a window that you might have seen before if you've ever made a scan within ThinkorSwim, and it's where we're going to be able to add our study parameters, where we can now specify exactly what we want to happen before our order is submitted. Now at the moment, there's already something in here by default. So in order to start fresh, let's go ahead and come up here and delete this by hitting the delete button over here on the right-hand side. Then in order to begin by adding our very first condition, we'll come over here to the far left-hand side and hit add a condition. For this one, I'm going to be looking for the 50-period moving average to be above the 200, and that's going to be our first condition. So to begin, we'll come up here to select a condition. It's going to be a study condition. We can then come up here to the search box and actually search for the simple moving average and then find and click on it in the list below. I then need to come down here on the left-hand side and adjust this over from the 9-period average to the 50. I can then come to the right and specify that I'm looking for this 50-period average to be greater than, so right here where it says is greater than, and then I just need to come to the right and specify what it needs to be greater than. So in this case, it is going to be a study condition once again. It's going to be a simple moving average just like before, pretty much the exact same thing. However, in this case, the only other thing I have to do is adjust this over from the 9-period average to the 200. So we'll go ahead and adjust that and hit save down below. And there we go. We've got our very first condition. Right here we can see we're looking for the 50-period average to be currently greater than the 200. What I can do next is start adding my conditions for the MACD indicator as well. So to do that, we'll just come down here and add another condition. We can then come up above and select the condition, which if I remember right is going to be a study condition, and we're looking for the MACD this time. And right down below, I'll go ahead and click on the very first one on the list here, MACD. In this case, it's already set as the default that I want. It's using the value line, which is actually the MACD line. And what I want to do is specify that I'm looking for it to cross above the signal line. So now in order to find the signal line, we'll come over here and select a condition. It's going to be a study condition. We'll again come up here and search for MACD and click on it in the list below. And the only thing we have to adjust on this side over here is adjust this over from the value line to the average line, which is really the signal line in this case. Now that that's done, we can come down here below and hit save. And although you can't see it at the moment, it is actually in this list. And I might be able to give a little bit more space for it. So there we go. Now we can actually see it. And right here we can see both of those conditions we just added. And there's only one other thing that I have to look for. So the last thing is looking for the MACD to also be below the 0 line when that crossover occurs. So to do that, we'll come down here and add another condition. We're going to come up here and select a condition. It's going to be a study condition. We'll then look for MACD once again, very similar as before. Go ahead and click on it in the list. You can then see it does have the MACD line selected, which is again the value line. And in this case, what I'm looking for is for it to be less than. We'll come over here and select is less than. And now coming over here to the right and selecting a condition, you actually have a couple different choices. I could just select value and say it's got to be less than a value of 0. Or we could come down here and say study condition once again, and again look for the MACD indicator. And then for this one, we're going to adjust the plot from the value line to the 0 line. So this is the other way you could go about it. But now that that's done, the only other thing I have to do is hit save. And now looking up here above, if I actually give enough space for it, we can see those 3 conditions that it's looking for. So in order for my order to be submitted, it's looking for the 50-period average to be greater than the 200. The MACD line has to cross above the average line or the signal line. And that crossover has to occur when the MACD line is less than 0. So that's a lot that it's looking for. This is a pretty advanced trade. And the only other thing that I wanted to do is ensure that it's looking for it on a 15-minute chart. So if I were to look up here at the moment, it's currently looking for it on a daily chart. But if I were to click on that, I could then come down below and flip it over to a 15-minute chart. Now that that's done, if we come down here below and hit the OK button, we can now see the parameters right down here below. And if I scroll down a little bit, it'll actually give me a description of exactly what this order is looking for. This is a lot to read through, so we won't go through it, but if you're ever confused and you want to make sure it's going to work exactly the way that you want it to, this is where you can come and read through it and make sure it sounds right. So again, what it's looking for is for all of those conditions that we just added to be met before the order above. So if I scroll back up, this order above, a limit order to buy it at 154.57, gets submitted. And in this case, that's not going to make a whole lot of sense because I have no idea what the price of the stock is going to be whenever those conditions are met. So in order to fix that, I'm just going to come up here and flip this over from a limit order to a market order. Now that that's done, I'll just come down here below and hit save. And now that it's all set, if I wanted to actually place this trade, I would just come down here below and hit confirm and send. But if I remember right, I actually wanted to place an order to automatically close this trade if the reverse ever happened, if the MACD line ever crossed back below the signal line. So in order to add that, in order to add another order to this trade, we're going to come down here to the lower left-hand corner and adjust this over from a single order, and instead come up here to the menu and adjust it over to first trigger sequence. So that simply means that after this first trade fills, I then want the second order to go out there. And in order to add the second order, we could either come over here and right-click on the order ticket and then say create opposite order, or just come up here to the very top of our chart just like we did before and click on the last traded price of the stock. And instead of clicking on the buy button, we're going to click on the sell button. That will then add the sell ticket down here below to close out of our position. And in order to add those conditions, in this case the MACD condition, we'll come back over here to the far right-hand side and click on that little settings icon. Since we already did this and we've got a little bit of practice on how to do it, I'm going to go through it a little bit faster this time. But we're going to come down here below to the conditions section. We'll again click in the little symbol box. We can then come to the right and click in the method box. Just like before, we need to base this off of a study condition. So I need to come up here and select study and then hit edit to start fresh. We'll then come up to the top and delete whatever comes up in here by default. I can then come over to the left and I'm going to start by adding a condition. It's going to be a study condition. And again, we're looking for the MACD line. So we'll search for MACD, go ahead and click on it in the list below. It's going to default to the value line, which is the MACD line. And again, what I'm looking for is for that to cross below, and we're looking for it to cross below the signal line. So it'll again be another study condition. We're looking for MACD, and all I need to do is flip this over from the value line to the average line. So just looking at it again from left to right, we're looking for the MACD value line to cross below the MACD average line. Now that that's set, we'll come down here and hit save. And for now, that's all I want to use for this condition. And what I need to do is still flip this over from a daily chart to a 15-minute chart. And now that I'm happy with it, I'll just come down here below and hit OK. And again, the only other thing we have to do is come up here and flip this over from a limit order that gets submitted to a market order. Coming down here below and hitting save and locking that in. What we're now saying is we want to automatically buy the stock if our conditions are ever met, if the 50-period moving average is above the 200, and there is a MACD crossover while below the zero line, I want to automatically buy the stock. And then if that ever happens, if I ever buy the stock, I want to automatically close the position when the MACD line crosses back below the signal line. Once set, in order to place it, we'll just come down here below and hit confirm and send. Then hit send. Once placed, we can always keep track of it by coming back up here above, and right here we can see those two buy and sell tickets. And we could also keep track of it by coming back over here to the monitor page. Looking right down here below in the working order section, we can see both of the buy and sell tickets. And then if I wanted to keep track of those parameters that I set, we could do that by coming over here to the far right-hand side of the order ticket and clicking on that same settings icon that we used to create the condition. So right there, we can now get a little description of exactly what this order ticket is looking for. And just like before, the description is listed out right here if you just wanted to double check that it's doing exactly what we want it. But that's how we can create a much more advanced order within ThinkorSwim. And again, you can base that trade off of nearly any type of condition or indicator. Hopefully after all that, you at least feel a little bit more comfortable with the process, but if not, that is totally understandable. For those of you who are still watching and want to learn more about TOS, you might find this next video helpful as well. But otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you on the next one.